On today's edition of the show, we are going to discuss that it feels like it's over for this Panthers team. The Florida Panthers are now going on a 4-game road trip and with their backs against the wall. We're going to discuss, is there hope for this team?
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Monday, March 27th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at Monoman12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel and send in your screenshot of your 5-star rating and send it over to me. So for your chance to win 2 free tickets to the Florida Panthers versus Toronto Maple Leafs game on April 10th. Best of luck, everybody. So, Cats fans, I come to you today not very optimistic about just this current stretch of the season. And we've spoken so much about how, and I guess I'll take a little blame for it because I was really emphasizing this point as far as jinxing about how before Tuesday's game against the Flyers, how the team was 6-0-1, not losing a single game in regulation after the trade deadline. And the coincidence is that they got healthy at that right time. And what do you know? The Florida Panthers get a little banged up again, and then they go on this 3-game losing streak. And we just realize more and more, even though Sam Bennett has only played 63 games, of how valuable Bennett is as far as the second line role for this team and the consistent shuffling that we've seen over the last few games. I mean, even mid-game adjustments when the Florida Panthers are behind as they have been this week. I mean, averaging 5 goals against in the last 3. And just it's not looking good right now for this team. I mean, you think about Saturday's game against the New York Rangers, only allowing 3 shots on goal through 20 minutes, and one of them being at 5-on-5. The one that they got on the power play, their first one, wasn't until the very end of the power play. Other than that, the PK was doing what they needed to do, clearing the zone, not giving them enough chances. Sergei Bobrovsky was lined up on one-time chances consistently with Zibanejad and Panarin. The Florida Panthers kept the top guns for New York in check, and the Florida Panthers being a plus 22 at even strength on the season. Well, that's after their game against New York, but so it was higher prior to their game, and 5-on-5 failed them on Saturday night, and it was the young guns of the New York Rangers that were the ones who got to the scoring for the blue shirts. And I mean, you think about for this Panthers team, I mean, you think about how also when they did go up 1-0, of how close it was to an offside. Like, it was as close as the 3-way finish in the Pixar movie Cars when Lightning McQueen stuck out his tongue for that 3-way tie for the Piston Cup. That was how close that skate was for Aaron Ekblad to be offside. And we'll talk way more about Aaron Ekblad later in the program. And you also had a chance to put this team away early as well. Mark Stahl's second goal, not Mark Stahl's goal, Ryan Lomber's goal that Mark Stahl got to him as he was pinned on the boards, and Eric Stahl with the screen. That the Panthers had a chance to capitalize even prior to that with 2 straight power plays too. The penalty on the delay of game and the Patrick Kane hook on Gus Forsling, as the Panthers were just entering the Rangers zone very cleanly. But it's a and they've had leads twice during this 3-game stretch. They had it against Philadelphia as well, and they had a 1-1 tie against the Maple Leafs on Thursday. So it's just games are the approach is fast in the beginning, and even in one game you were neck and neck with a team that you ended up being blown out to. But this is a 60-minute game, ladies and gentlemen, and the way that the New York Rangers came out in that second period, my goodness, it was just a complete 180, and they were controlling the play. And I mean, you think about how the New York Rangers came back in this one. I mean, it wasn't really anything on the cycle where you're trying to shift the Cats into a different part of the ice, and then one person's there to one time it, which were really good at. And you think about how the Kako goal was kind of similar to the Barkov goal that he had, where Barkov's came later in the game, but the Kako one came as the one to cut the deficit. And then the Panthers on the second one, they're caught puck watching, and as Alexis Lafreniere, number 1 overall pick, comes on the ice, he's there to get the puck and then goes backhand on Bobrovsky. And the fourth one, the fourth one especially, Aaron Ekblad just loses the puck, and then Filipino goes on a breakaway, which Bobrovsky has no chance on. And unfortunate bounce with the third one where Patrick Kane just throws it and then it knocks off Carter Verhaeghe's stick and in the net. I was hoping that Carter Verhaeghe was going to have a revenge goal, because we saw that happened to Sam Bennett against the Boston Bruins back on January 28th. I was hoping that Carter Verhaeghe was going to get his chance to get a revenge goal and bring the Florida Panthers back. But that top pair, man, it's been a big reason why the Florida Panthers have lost these last 3 games. And Jacob even mentioned it. Jacob and I, when we did our recap on Wednesday, we were even mentioning it, that there was odd man rushes and breakaways given up by that pair of Forsling Ekblad against Detroit, and and we've seen these warning signs all year, especially with Ekblad's play. And David Rodriguez of the FLA Cats hockey podcast, and he posted a video of live golfer Brooks Koepka using a parking cone as a prop, signaling his feelings towards Ekblad, and was still in distress even after the Florida Panthers scored. And the video shows the crowd reacting to a goal that you could assume that's Barkov's goal, which now Barkov's on a 10-game point streak for the Cats. I believe it's I don't have the numbers in front of me, but he does have a 10-game goal streak. I have it somewhere around here, but Barkov just with Aaron Ekblad's play, going back to Ekblad, it's just, you got to consider changing the pairings. You have to. Multiple times we saw Brandon Montour is the guy that's back to break up an odd man rush too, even though his pair hasn't been the best neither. But you have to do some switching of the pairs, because there comes a certain point where Aaron Ekblad's been a liability at times for this Panthers team. I don't think he's to the point of getting scratched by any means. I think this version of Aaron Ekblad, you're better with him than without. But as far as playing those heavy top line minutes, I think the role needs to be reduced. I mean, 3 takeaways in the game in 20 some odd minutes of ice time, and puck management was an issue too. The Florida Panthers were having a hard time exiting their zone, and it's just, it's just hard to watch this part of the Panthers right now, and it's they're playing their worst hockey at the wrong time and have fallen even more behind, with the Pittsburgh Penguins winning in regulation at last minute as Evgeny Malkin strips Anthony Mantha in the neutral zone and then takes it by himself to score on Darcy Kemper. And the Islanders gifted you by only getting 1 out of 4 points in the weekend. It's just it's right there for the taking, and the Panthers just can't get out of their own way. In segment number 2, we're going to discuss more about the Florida Panthers' last 3 games, them going on a 4-game road trip, and continue to talk about if there's hope for this Panthers team. We're going to discuss this next on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But first, we're going to tell you all about Athletic Greens. And our next partner is a product that I literally use every day. And I started taking AG1 because I need sometimes a little bit of a break from the coffee. So that's why I use and take my Athletic Greens. So what is this stuff? With 1 delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, nervous system, immune system, energy, recovery, focus, and aging. All the things. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition with just 1 scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Segment number 2 here on this Monday, March 27th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. And I didn't even mention that the Florida Panthers faced Yaroslav Halak twice and Igor Shesterkin once, and you didn't get a single point against the New York Rangers. But that also goes to show how great and how much firepower the New York Rangers actually have. I think that team can very well make a run to the Stanley Cup final. I really do think they're the Boston Bruins' biggest threat. And maybe Toronto. I know a lot of you guys won't believe it until you see it, but I think Toronto is just built to finally get over the hump of winning a round and all. So I think that Toronto really has a chance. Also, Barkov's points in the last 10 games. I finally have that number in front of me. 3 goals, 12 assists, so 15 points in 10 games. So impressive by the captain, and he's performed. But just too much of the shuffling of the lines, of course, with the injury, has just really hurt the Panthers. And again, Sam Bennett is a key component to this Panthers team. It's just, I know the points aren't there, 40 points through 63 games, but more of what he brings on the ice is the most physical forward, I would say, and guy who's going to match up well against the team's second line center and their top 6 players too. And that's what the Florida Panthers are missing. And, you know, I like that Toulouse throwing it on Barkov's wing, but of course situation comes with having to do a little bit of a shuffle. And let's also look at the second period in the last 3 games. Outscored 9-2, and the Panthers are losing it in the middle frame of these last 3 games. I mean, 2.67 goals for, 5.33 goals against. Only given up 1 power play goal, and that was the 5-on-3 against the Toronto Maple Leafs. And yeah, you're starting a 4-game road trip tonight against the Ottawa Senators, which we'll preview it in the 3rd segment. But you have a last back-to-back. After this trip, you only have 1 road game left, which is at Washington on the 8th. But it's a no room for error road trip for this Cats team. And I want to take a little bit of a second to talk about how this team has been gifted over the last 3 games. They even had a playoff spot on Monday. And they seem to get in their own way. And now I'm looking at point pace based on the other teams in the wild card race, and it's 93 points. That is likely going to be that number. What are the Panthers going to have to do to get to 93? 7-2-0 in the last 9. And Panthers will play Monday. The Islanders will play on Monday. But the Panthers can't help themselves. They still go to the box way too often. And it's funny because the Tampa Bay Lightning are first in the NHL in penalty infraction minutes, but they're still middle of the pack in penalty kill. The Florida Panthers, they're not structurally built, and coaching has a lot to do with it. I know I haven't been too harsh on Paul Maurice, but I think what Paul Maurice is doing currently, as far as that end of the ice, is not working, and some of it might be personnel. But we also discussed about the amount of penalties that the Winnipeg Jets took in Paul Maurice's tenure. That was from 2014 to 2022. The Winnipeg Jets were second, and the first one was the Pittsburgh Penguins, who won 2 Stanley Cups in that span. So most penalty infraction minutes doesn't necessarily correlate to poor PK play, let's say. So, but still, it comes to a matter of staying out of the box. And there was one really bad penalty that that Mark Stahl took in the second period on Jacob Trouba. Just he was beat, and he was tripped Jacob Trouba, which I also think that Adam Fox should have gone to the box towards the end of the game against the New York Rangers. I think that the Panthers should have had a power play chance at the end. And also with Brandon Montour, as great as he was at stopping some rushes, I think he was very unaware of the clock when placing the puck around the boards towards the end, and where the Florida Panthers couldn't get it from behind the net and feed it back to someone in the slot. So I think that was just a little bit of poor hockey IQ from the Panthers in the last few minutes when they went 6-on-5 as well. So it's just communications off with this team, but bad puck management as well, and the play at 5-on-5 just hasn't been up to par. And with this 4-game road trip coming up, you gotta ask yourself, how desperate are you as a team? And we spoke last week about, is Alex Lyon going to get 1 or 2 more starts for this Panthers team? We're each at the time we were saying 2. It's like, okay, and second end of a back-to-back against Philly, and maybe second end of a back-to-back against Montreal this Thursday. I might be looking too far ahead, but I think you might have to be so desperate that fact that you have to put your $10 million man in all 4 games, maybe. Or maybe get those hopefully 3 wins out of the way, and then put Alex Lyon against the second worst team in the NHL, but at the same time, you lost to that second worst team in the NHL, and Columbus just beat New York on Friday night in overtime, where now the Columbus Blue Jackets are now the second highest odds to land Connor Bedard as the number 1 overall pick. Now San Jose has that. So remember that players don't tank. The front offices do. And you're going to get their best too this week. And it's do or die. That's what this road trip is. 8 points are on the line. Anything less than 7 out of 8 Not thinking about it. Maybe you can get away with 6. Maybe, but but every point loss is just it's just hurting this team and their chances, and you got it. That's what happens when you're behind the 8 ball, as the Panthers have, and this the Panthers hadn't experienced this kind of losing streak in a long time, like 2 months more than. Funny enough, the current losing streak that they're on was the last time that they had a two game losing streak in regulation was when they also played the Rangers. And what happened after that? The Florida Panthers started winning, pulling off and getting some wins here and there. And that's me being optimistic. But we don't even know if Sam Bennett's going to play on Monday night against the Ottawa Senators, which gives us a good opportunity to transition over to segment number 3, where we're going to talk about that matchup between the Florida Panthers and the Ottawa Senators. We're going to discuss this next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But first, we're going to tell you all about our friends at Built Bar. And are you looking for a delicious treat but don't want to sacrifice all the calories? Then we have the right thing for you. We have Built Bar. You can now purchase them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club in the pharmacy section. Ask them for our hit flavors, brownie batter and churro. Or you can go to your local Sam's Club and grab a 13-bar box of our hit flavors as well. You don't want to miss this at Built. You can thank me later. Third and final segment on this Monday, March 27th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, where the Florida Panthers, last time they faced off against the Ottawa Senators, they got a franchise record 58 shots on goal on Anton Forsberg. And the game was tied late, 3-3. And then the Florida Panthers carried away towards the end. Matthew Tkachuk ended it on the empty net goal. Brandon Montour got the game-winning goal. But one thing for the Ottawa Senators is that even though they struggle at scoring at even strength at 5-on-5, they're minus 28. And this would be a good opportunity for the Florida Panthers to get their game back as far as the 5-on-5 play, and talk to each other on the bench, and just make sure that when you're getting off the ice that the line changes are crisp as well, because but we've seen far too many men on the ice penalties for the Florida Panthers, and that of course that's something to do with amount of shuffling that we've seen all season, with health being an issue for this team. And you just got to hope that the Florida Panthers just find a way to play a disciplined game. And it's also a good opportunity to take advantage on the goalie situation going on for the Ottawa Senators right now. Max Sogard and Dylan Ferguson are the tandem right now, even though Cam Talbot is on the roster per cap friendly. He hasn't played since March 4th for the Senators, even though they traded for Jacob Chikrin. He's week to week, but they have studs, man. Timmy Stützle, who's 5 goals away from 40, and he was the number 3 overall pick in the same draft as Anton Lundell. Timmy Stützle, that guy might end up being the best player of that draft. And you had Lafreniere and Byfield drafted ahead of him. And also the Ottawa Senators, 2 picks later, there's a promising defensive prospect there, and Jake Sanderson as well. Thomas Chabot is a number 1 defenseman for the Senators, but they can also score on the power play. Even though their 5-on-5 numbers aren't the best, this is why you need to keep them at 5-on-5, because especially early, if you fall behind, you're emotionally behind the 8 ball too, and the Panthers, in a desperation mode that they are right now, there's it's just all about keeping that discipline. And let's not also forget that the Ottawa Senators traded for Alex DeBrincat, which, like, is he going to get paid? Is he not going to get paid? We don't know. We don't know the situation because of also the ownership situation in Ottawa, where the new owners, are they going to take on a project to build a downtown arena in Ottawa? And also, the president of the United States went to Ottawa and said, "I like all your teams except the Leafs," which was kind of beautiful. That a lot of people share uh, a lot of mutual dislike for the team in hockey's mecca. So pretty cool thing that we saw there when the president went to Canada's capital this past weekend. But you got with how the Panthers are playing. I mean, I made a Pixar reference earlier, and I guess I'm gonna make another one right now. It's just like that scene from The Incredibles right before uh, Mr. Incredible chokes his boss and throws him through multiple walls. The boss was saying, "I'm not happy, not happy," and I'm sure that's how the Florida Panthers are feeling about their play right now. That they just can't be. And with the amount of help that they've gotten to, which the Panthers, weirdly, they still could very well be in a wild card spot by Thursday. Still, just I don't know why I'm doing this to myself, but I'm just breaking down every scenario and then counting regulation wins. What would happen if this result happens? And it's just I'm hurting myself doing that as a fan of this team, and just wanting to badly see this team make the postseason too. And for this team, they're just because the Florida Panthers dominated the Ottawa Senators the first go round doesn't mean it's going to happen the second go round. And one example was even in their President's Trophy winning season last year, where they dominated the Columbus Blue Jackets, scored 7 goals in one, 9 goals in the other, and then here comes Jonas Johansson versus JF Berube last season, and then you have that type of game where you can't get anything going. And I hope that the Panthers keep that in mind too. At least the Panthers who were on that team last year to this year's team, when thinking about the goaltending situation in Mads Søgaard and Dylan Ferguson. I hope that that's not the mentality. Same thing with when they go to into Thursday's game against Montreal, knowing that you've averaged over 7 goals a game in 3 matchups, and just a team that you've dominated. And I hope that it doesn't get them to the point that it hurts their game as far as being sloppy and just thinking, "Oh no, we can take on these guys." That's what I'm hoping doesn't happen for this Panthers team. And it's just one thing is that it just needs to be focused on just this one game. It's just every game needs to be feel like a one game season at this point, because you got to fight like you'll be eliminated tomorrow if you don't win. That's really how the Panthers are going to have to approach it, in my opinion. At least that's how I feel that I'm approaching it, watching it as a fan. And of course, I'll be dual screening the Islanders Devils game. I think they're facing against the Devils tomorrow. Let me double check on that. Yep, they're at home against the Devils at 7:30. So the game, while the Florida Panthers are in intermission, the Islanders Devils game will be starting. So have the 2 screens up, and nothing, nothing will be interrupted as far as my hockey viewing experience on Monday night. And I'm sure a lot of you guys are doing that too. One bit of good news as well, as far as the Florida Panthers front, is that the University of Michigan has punched their ticket to the Final Four, and Mackie Samoskevich got the game winner 54 seconds into overtime, enters the zone cleanly, and nails a snapshot from the high slot to give the University of Michigan a 2-1 win in overtime against Penn State. And now they're headed to the Frozen Four, which their game will be on April 6th at 8:30. The Florida Panthers will have a game that night as well against the Ottawa Senators. Their game will be at 7 that night at home, April 6th. And the University of Michigan and Mackie Samoskevich and company will be performing on at 8:30 on that same night. So a little bit of programming note for if you want to watch a Panthers highly touted prospect for the Florida Panthers who got the game winner. And also, Adam Vantilli with the first goal for the University of Michigan. If it's not Bedard, if it wasn't Bedard being the number one overall pick this coming draft, Adam Vantilli is probably would have probably been number one overall. He's likely going to go number 2 in the draft, and that is just a powerhouse that the University of Michigan has there. But congrats to Mackie, congrats to the University of Michigan Wolverines for advancing to the Frozen Four, which will be held in Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. But on tomorrow's edition of the show, we will be recapping the Florida Panthers game against the Ottawa Senators from the Canadian Tire Center, and we could have a guest on the show who will be attending the game for the Florida Panthers and the Ottawa Senators. So make sure you subscribe so that you will see me and that guest as we recap the game. But in the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone, and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure to listen to today's episode of Game to Game NHL. Every moment, every top performance, Locked On Game to Game covers you from everything around the National Hockey League. Follow Locked On Game to Game NHL on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. So I'm Armando Velez, signing off. And you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.